Hello and welcome to episode 111 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I'm one of the co-founders here at ETR. As always, I am joined by fellow co-founder Evan Silva for these team-by-team pods, and we are coming off of maybe the most injury-riddled week I can ever remember for notable skill players, which is going to create an extremely busy week for season-long players on the waiver wire, going to create an extremely busy week for DFS players trying to project replacement roles and usage. Evan, what's going on?
What's up, man? Those from noon central until 2 o'clock was the most tilting Sunday that I've ever experienced. First of all, my Sunday ticket and Red Zone were not working, so I had and I was on hold with DirecTV for like an hour and a half, and I'm reading Twitter, and I've got the local the Bears Giants game, and Daigle pulls up Dolphins Bills, so we've got two games on, and then I'm reading Twitter, and just every single dude is getting injured. Bodies are dropping. It was an absolute brutal first couple hours of Sunday. It got increasingly better as the injuries stopped mounting, and that Sunday night game, New England against Seattle, was such a thriller. It ended on a positive note, but man, I thought I was going to have a heart attack for about 2 hours there.
Yeah, it's not good. And I talked a little bit on the solo pod about it more. You guys can go back and listen to that episode 110. But yeah, it's not good. Obviously, it's not good for fantasy either, because it introduces a ton more variance and a ton more luck into the game. But hopefully you have deep teams if you've had injuries, and hopefully you're grinding the waiver wire hard. On today's show, we are going to go team by team through each squad in the NFC, discussing our most important takeaways. This podcast, of course, is free that you're listening to. The AFC version is premium. You can either listen to it on the site if you're logged in, or through the private RSS feed each subscriber can find in the About drop-down. The show schedule the rest of the week is all premium. Myself, Evan, and Wiggins, Friday night talking the full DFS slate. Dink and Leone on Saturdays talking GPPs, which, if you guys listen to that, it's quickly becoming my new favorite show. Listen to those guys talk about GPPs is so good. And then Evan and I on Sunday morning taking your questions, discussing late news right before lock. If you have not signed up yet, we do have weekly options. We do have monthly options. The full season option is up. Access to all our projections, our shows, top plays, Silva's matchups, all my DFS stuff, everything you need. Okay. We have a ton to cover, Evan. Let's start with the Arizona Cardinals. And there's nothing really bad to say about the Arizona Cardinals, man. I mean, before we get to players, let's just talk about the way that they're playing. They lead the NFL in no-huddle rate. They're playing at an incredibly fast pace. They ran 82 plays in week 1 against the 49ers, and then 73 plays against Washington in week 2. They get Detroit, Carolina, the Jets, Dallas, Seattle, Miami next. I mean, it's just a situation for Kyler Murray, for DeAndre Hopkins, for Kenyon Drake to just go absolutely ham. The guy that I didn't mention is Christian Kirk. I mean, Christian Kirk only saw 10% of the targets on a day that DeAndre Hopkins comes back to earth and sees 23%. I'm curious what you think about Christian Kirk right now. Why is he not seeing the volume that we expected, and anything else with Arizona?
Christian Kirk, I mean, first of all, Kyler Murray is not thrown for a bunch of yards. I mean, he's making the highlight reel plays on the ground week after week at this point. But I mean, he had 230 some yards in the first game and 280 yards in this last game. And we talked about it, entering the season, that this was a team that was going to be really, really good. Or in year one under Cliff Kingsbury, their strength as a team was their rushing attack. And it has remained so, even though Kenyon Drake is off to somewhat of a slow start. See, I think that Kenyon Drake is a really good buy low right now. First of all, there have been so many running back injuries that any healthy running back that is getting consistent usage is at a premium right now. And you mentioned that the schedule upcoming for Arizona is glorious. The Lions, to opposing running backs, this is the Arizona's week 3 opponent. They've given up almost 7 yards per carry. So I think that Kenyon Drake's breakthrough is coming. I think that even Chase Edmonds is a guy to try to trade for right now in season-long leagues. If you don't already have him, you should have him if you use the draft kit, because we were way, way higher than consensus on Chase Edmonds. And I know he had a slower week too, but I think that he's going to be he's playing about 35% of the snaps right now in each of their first 2 games, and they're using him as a satellite back in the passing game. And if something happens to Kenyon Drake, who, at the college or NFL level has never handled more than 15.7 touches per game over the course of a full season, then Chase Edmonds becomes a league winner. I would even go down to Eno Benjamin as their number 3 back, as a guy that, like in FFPC main event where you have 20 roster spots, like Eno Benjamin should be rostered in every single league in a deeper bench league like that.
Yeah.
And I think that even Christian Kirk, like, he's going to hit waiver wires. And I think you just pick him up and you put him on your bench, because if something happens to DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk is back in play. You probably can't use him with any level of confidence right now, even as like a wide receiver 4. But this is an offense to invest in. They are absolutely rolling. 155 plays through 2 games. They're executing the offense that Cliff Kingsbury wanted to run in year 1.
Yeah, do not give up on Christian Kirk. I mean, Larry Fitzgerald, we know he starts off hot in terms of target share, in terms of production. He's going to level off. DeAndre Hopkins, I think, is going to settle in around 25% of the targets. Christian Kirk's days are coming for sure. Let's go to Atlanta, man. And everyone's right on Calvin Ridley. I think it's safe to say right now, Calvin Ridley is just an absolute straight baller. People are saying, is he the new wide receiver 1 in Atlanta? Would you rather have Calvin Ridley than Julio Jones right now? After the game against Dallas, Dirk Cutter comes out and says, well, Julio was double teamed and maybe the hamstring bothered him a little bit more than he was letting on. This is the old story with Julio. He has all these nicks. He plays through them. I'm not worried about that. It was just a bad game for Julio, man. I mean, God, he dropped that 42-yard touchdown from Russell Gage, and it's just a bad game for Julio. The game before, he had 9 for 147. Like, I'm not worried about Julio. The other thing I think to mention is Russell Gage. Since Mo Sanu went down, Russell Gage at 7.9 targets a day. And it's not a small sample either. I mean, that's 11 games now of Russell Gage averaging 7.9 targets a day. Now, Gage is seeing 23% of the team targets this year. Julio only 17. Like, that's not going to last. That's going to flip. So I'm curious what you think about what's going on in the wideout core. Do we have a new wide receiver 1 in Atlanta, and anything else going on with the Falcons?
Well, I don't want to call Calvin Ridley the Falcons' new number 1 receiver, because I don't think that he is, but I would rather have him in fantasy than Julio Jones right now, largely due to the hamstring injury. Now, people say Julio Jones is limping around. Like, Julio Jones has been limping around the field for 8 years. Like, no one has more limps per route run than Julio Jones for the last decade. But I don't know. We're going to have to follow the injury report on Julio. And Calvin Ridley, I mean, he's just an insane route runner. He plays in, the highest volume passing offense in football. That's not going to change. Their defense is bad. Their running game is not very good. They have played to results of 38-25 and 40-39 in their first 2 games. His floor is going to be supplemented by garbage time, and his ceiling is going to be supplemented by garbage time. And so, I think that he's right in the mix as a top 5 fantasy receiver rest of season.
Yeah, Todd Gurley, hopefully you don't have Todd Gurley. I mean, that was kind of the range that we were trying to avoid in season long. But if people do, I mean, it's kind of worrisome right now. He's not really getting used in the pass game. And I saw other backs in there at the goal line. I saw Judge Ito Smith in there at the goal line a little bit too. It's just not great, but I think expected on Todd Gurley. It's just not great, man. But given the state of the running back position, like, he's still getting 60% of the touches, and so that's going to be worth a roster spot. It's just not exciting on Todd Gurley right now. All right, let's go to Carolina.
We should also mention that Hayden Hurst had that breakout game that we were sort of anticipating after the signs were there in week 1, and then he executed in week 2. Now, his 43-yard touchdown did come on like a wide open coverage bust, but those things are going to happen. He capitalized, he caught it, and he had a big day.
Yep. Okay. Let's go to Carolina. One of the biggest stories of fantasy is the injury to Christian McCaffrey, ankle sprain, high ankle sprain. Original timeline report was 4 to 6 weeks. He comes out and says he thinks he can beat that. We saw Saquon Barkley try to do the same thing last year. He comes back way sooner than expected from this kind of injury. We'll see what Christian McCaffrey can do. But man, I always thought that Mike Davis could play. I'm no team watch the tape guy, but Mike Davis always looked like he could be an NFL starter to me, and I think that this new regime agrees. The old regime preferred Reggie Bonifant. The new regime appears to prefer Mike Davis. I think they will go to this game against the Chargers in week 3 with Mike Davis as the starter, Bonifant as the number 2, and Trenton Cannon as the number 3. And the best thing to me about Mike Davis is he's clearly a very good pass catcher. I mean, he ran 17 routes in relief of Christian McCaffrey in week 2, was targeted 8 times on those 17 routes and caught all 8. I mean, that's a good sign right there for Mike Davis. So what do you think about what's going to happen while Christian McCaffrey is out?
Yeah, I think it also leaves the light on for Curtis Samuel, who I think had 4 rushes this past week. And I mean, Curtis Samuel looks like a running back when he's taking handoffs. So I think it could help him. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you on Mike Davis. I think that he is, he's like a replacement level running back, but you can be a starting, and a very productive running back in the right situations. If you're just a replacement level talent, he can catch passes and he's fine, between the tackles. And they cut Reggie Bonifon and did keep him on the practice squad. They're going to elevate him if they haven't already. But that tells you that they clearly favor Mike Davis, probably by a good margin over Reggie Bonifon. They weren't even worried that some other team was going to pick him up.
Yeah, and the Curtis Samuel stuff is certainly interesting. I think he will get a few more carries. I don't know if it'll make a big enough difference because Robbie Anderson is absolutely going berserk right now. The latest guy to get removed from Adam Gase and kind of break out is Robbie Anderson. Do you think this is sustainable on Robbie?
I do tend to think that it is sustainable on Robbie if they continue to use him. Like there's like a clear tier in their passing game, and it's Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore. And, I think that I anticipated before the season it being spread out a little bit more to maybe, more Curtis Samuel. I mean, it can't get any worse than Ian Thomas right now. And, now we're removing Christian McCaffrey. Mike Davis obviously can catch passes, but Christian McCaffrey was a better pass catcher, than, any running back in the league. So, yes, I think that Robbie Anderson at this point is an every week fantasy play.
Okay, let's go to the Chicago Bears. And surprising, right out of the gate, Anthony Miller is in the doghouse. He's running fewer routes than Darnell Mooney. He's barely ahead of Javon Wims right now in terms of routes run, which is weird. And then Allen Robinson, struggles again against the Giants, which I think is concerning. They do get the Falcons this week. I mean, if the Bears are going to do it in the pass game, it should be against the Falcons here. What do you think about what's going on with Chicago?
Yeah, continuing to use, 2 receiver sets and for a lot of two receiver sets and 2 tight end sets. And for a lot of teams, that pulls the slot receiver off the field. Anthony Miller is the slot receiver. And Anthony Miller stunk last week. 3 targets, no catches, dropped a first quarter touchdown pass. Now he's facing Atlanta this week, so everything is taken on a week by week basis. And, I think that he's going to be a really interesting tournament play in DFS this week. And, not the worst wide receiver 4/flex just based on the opponent and the total. But yeah, it's been rocky for Anthony Miller in large part just because the way that they are running their offense, and he is not a consistent part of 3 receiver sets.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that they paid Tariq Cohen, but then, they didn't use him that much. And, it wasn't a ton of money, but I thought it's just silly. But yeah, they are committed to David Montgomery, and David Montgomery does seem healthy, at least, and that's more than you can say for a lot of running backs in the league for sure. And I do hope that they get Nick Foles in there sooner rather than later. I mean, you're in Chicago. Are the calls for Nick Foles coming fast and furious now? I assume they are.
No.
Really?
2-0. I mean, dude, I hate myself every time I turn on the radio here, but they're like talking about, maybe having to franchise Mitch after the season because he's playing so well. Like I'm not even kidding you.
Yeah. Okay.
The Tariq Cohen thing, a lot of this is so Tariq Cohen was a Ryan Pace draft pick. And at the end of the year, the GM has to bring to, ownership and be like, hey, we did all these things. Hey, we nailed the Tariq Cohen pick. We locked them up to an extension, and they put that on their resume. I mean, Tariq Cohen had no business getting any kind of a contract extension. He's been one of the worst offensive skill position players for the last year and a half in the entire league. But that's why they do that kind of thing, because Ryan Pace knows that his time could come to an end, and that's a resume builder for him.
For sure. Okay, let's go to Dallas, the first game without Blake Jarwin. And man, I did not see this coming. Dalton Schultz leads the Cowboys in targets. I think maybe part of the fallout, and this is just speculation, but part of the fallout of the Tyron Smith and the offensive line woes, perhaps, is that the looks go to CeeDee Lamb, the looks go to Dalton Schultz. I mean, Michael Gallup is getting no easy looks. He's not in the slot at all. He's exclusively out wide. He's up the sideline. You saw him make that outrageous catch up the sideline. CeeDee Lamb is the one getting the short crossers. He's exclusively out of the slot. Dalton Schultz, ran 36 routes on 49 Dak dropbacks 26 times in the slot. So, I mean, these guys are getting the easier looks. Do you think that's what's going on? Do you have worries about Michael Gallup? Like, would you rather have CeeDee Lamb or Michael Gallup right now?
See, Michael Gallup still has a 30% air yard share, which is right behind Amari Cooper, who leads the team at like 36. He's being used as the deep threat.
Yeah.
And he's not necessarily going to see heavy target volume doing that. But man, he's going to get big play opportunities. So, and I mean, they have a lights out schedule coming up too. I mean, I think that Michael Gallup's day is going to come. I think that we should probably expect, we have to build in more inconsistency to our projection for him because CeeDee Lamb has just come on so strong. CeeDee Lamb is already 2 games into his NFL career, like a locked in every week wide receiver 2. Amari Cooper is, wound up being one of the best values in all of draft season again. And Gallup is kind of lagging behind those guys, but not in terms of deep targets. And those lead to big plays. Dalton Schultz, I didn't expect that from Dalton Schultz, and it certainly was driven by comeback mode against Atlanta. We actually picked him up in on one of my main event teams, and we started him, and that was like just we really weren't we were like hoping for like 4 for 40. Maybe 3 for 40. I probably would have taken that. He goes, 9 for 88 and 1. I don't expect that from him going forward, but certainly in tight end premium, he's a guy that you got to consider starting based on the forthcoming opponents.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And yeah, I think there's guys like Logan Thomas and other guys down there where you can make a case that maybe Dalton Schultz is better than that now just for the game environment. Like you can be the 4th option in Dallas and be better than Washington's 2nd option or something like that. Or as we'll get to with Chris Herndon, I mean, maybe better than Herndon too.
Yeah, one other thing. So the Cowboys have had, like sort of a cluster of offensive line injuries, yet Dak has taken only 2 sacks and I think like 10 or 12 quarterback hits, which is pretty good when you're without your left tackle, your right tackle, and your center. So, under Jason Garrett, they would always struggle with making adjustments to their offensive line losses. And now it looks like they are, showing some ability to overcome that. They did face a team that doesn't have a lot of pass rush in general in Atlanta, but they're going to face another one in Seattle, in this upcoming game. So, but it does look like they've been able to overcome these offensive line, because when this would happen in the past under Jason Garrett, like their offense would just fall apart.
For sure. Okay, let's go to Detroit. Without Kenny Golladay and without Vitae, their right tackle, I mean, it's really tough for this team. And that was one of the reasons that I thought that I was okay to get off Davante Adams in cash last week. I was like, God, the Packers just come out and absolutely stomp this team any way that they want. Obviously, that's not really the way it worked. I got lucky. Davante got hurt, which we'll talk about in a second. But I also think that this Detroit team is hampered by coaching. The one thing that I do think that I like that I've seen from Detroit is DeAndre Swift. I mean, he's earned 10 targets on 39 routes run, and 8 catches, 75 yards, had that bad TD drop in week 1. But, if DeAndre Swift can play more, and I think we'll probably have to remove this coaching staff for that to happen, but if he can play more and Matthew Stafford sticks, DeAndre Swift is going to be very, very valuable in fantasy and kind of an Alvin Kamara role. Do expect Kenny Golladay back this week, which I think is big. You tweeted about that. I mean, they need Kenny Golladay back badly. Obviously, every team needs their best receiver back, but Kenny Golladay opens up so much more for this team. And as you noted on Twitter, I think a good time to buy low on a lot of Lions. Talk to me about Detroit.
Yeah, I think it's time to buy low on them. I mean, I think that Stafford might get dropped in a bunch of season-long leagues, and Marvin Jones hasn't exactly torn it up. He did get in the box last week, but and then Golladay, of course, has been a 0 so far. Hawkinson, I think you could go either way on because his usage just hasn't been that great, even with Golladay out. But yeah, I think that Swift is definitely a buy as well. I mean, this upcoming schedule, their first 2 games were rough. I mean, week 1 against the Bears, week 2 against the Packers, who have a good pass defense, and the Lions didn't have Kenny Golladay, who is Sports Info Solutions has pointed out. The splits went with and without Kenny Golladay in terms of Matthew Stafford's deep ball attempts is just, it's massive. Like Kenny Galladay unlocks the vertical passing attack of Darrell Bevell. And that's what got Stafford off to that super, super hot start last year. One of the biggest arm quarterbacks in the NFL. But upcoming, they have the Cardinals, who, I mean, this is going to be the second highest total game of week 3. And then the Saints, who didn't look very good. This game will be at Ford Field indoors. The Saints, their defense didn't look very good on Monday night against the Raiders. Jaguars, Falcons, Colts, Vikings. We know that their defense is trash at this point. Washington, and then the Panthers, and then the Texans. So this is one heck of like an 8-game run upcoming for the Lions that they should be able to smash if they could keep their guys healthy. And their defense is always going to be there to assist them because their defense can't stop anyone.
Yeah, their pass rush is pathetic. Okay, Green Bay. Davante Adams says he could have played through it. It was just a small hamstring tweak, but man, I hate skill players with hamstring injuries. It just sucks, and we'll get to Will Fuller on the next podcast too. But yeah, I mean, Davante Adams says he could have come back in, so I think there's a chance he'll play in week 3. I mean, they obviously need him. They do not have a lot behind him. MVS and Lazard are certainly going to be on the radar if Davante Adams ends up sitting. I wanted to mention one thing about Aaron Jones and projections, and like it's tough to click on Aaron Jones at 7,100 or whatever he is when he shares so much. But that's where like the efficiency and the team touchdown stuff with projections helps. Like we double checked and triple checked the volume projections for Green Bay running backs. We were conservative on Aaron Jones in terms of volume, and he was still popping as a great value in the matchup against Detroit. So just something there for as more of a reminder to myself that, just because Aaron Jones is going to lose work to Jamal Williams doesn't mean that he's not in play. And certainly from a tournament leverage perspective, if you go back and listen to the solo pod, I talked a lot about Aaron Jones there. But anyways, I mean, Aaron Jones, when Davante Adams hasn't played, his splits are out of control in the pass game. Very good pass catcher is Aaron Jones. I think people raised some eyebrows maybe. Evan, you tweeted out which running backs you'd like to have for the rest of the season. Aaron Jones was in the top 5. What do you think is going on with Green Bay right now?
Well, I think that Green Bay is a better team than I expected them to be entering the year. They were, on paper, they were set up for a lot of regression. They won a bunch of close games last year. I wasn't confident in their offense. They really did so little to supplement it entering the season, but I feel a lot better about their offense at this point. I truly think that Aaron Rodgers is more comfortable, which he stated during preseason. He's a lot more comfortable in the second year of the offense. They've got a good offensive line. They've got a quarterback playing at a high level. Aaron Jones is an insanely good receiver. I mean, I think he's on par, like, just maybe a notch below like Alvin Kamara as a receiver. Like he can run wide receiver routes and make plays like down the sideline in the passing game. And, you can argue that it's actually a good thing if they're going to continue to use him a lot in the passing game and they're going to limit his carries. Carries have a higher injury propensity than do receptions for running backs. That it might raise his chances of staying healthy over the course of the season if they're, giving Jamal Williams or, A.J. Dillon a carry here or there. And their rushing attack has been lights out so far. So that versatility, that usage in the passing game, the increased confidence in the Packers offense as a whole was the reason that I would take Aaron Jones right now over Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon, maybe even Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was hard to keep out of the top 5 going forward, but we'll talk about him on the next podcast.
Yep, exactly. Okay. The Los Angeles Rams caught an injury to Cam Akers. Looks like a rib injury to Cam Akers. Also, Malcolm Brown banged up his pinky, I think, but he's expected to play through it. The thing is, Darrell Henderson comes in and kind of like the forgotten man there and comes in and looks really good. I mean, Darrell Henderson, we always thought could really play. He looks like he's shot out of a cannon compared to Malcolm Brown. Now, I don't know if that matters that much. These coaches love giving the ball to Malcolm Brown, but would you be looking to add Darrell Henderson on waiver wires?
Yeah, I mean, I've been like a Darrell Henderson truther, and finally he gets his out. I mean, I didn't think he looked bad in his opportunities last year. He just, I guess he, wasn't up to speed, and he got banged up, and he got banged up in training camp this year, and got off to that slow start and fell to the clear number 3. But then he gets in the game, and I mean, yeah, he's he added in. He's so much more explosive than Malcolm Brown. He can play in the passing game. Yeah, this is definitely a guy that we want to see. Now they got the Bills coming up, and that's not going to be the best matchup. And there's a lot of murkiness with regard to how severe these injuries are. It sounds like Malcolm Brown is definitely going to play, and Cam Akers might not play. So at best, you would be getting a guy in a 2-man backfield, facing a stout opponent, and that's not necessarily a great recipe. But I mean, running backs get hurt. I mean, so many running backs have gotten hurt so far, that having a talented guy in a productive offense, even if he's in a committee right now, like, he absolutely belongs on your roster.
Yeah. Other thing I wanted to mention is Tyler Higbee, and I'm starting to think that this Philly defense could be like one of the worst against tight ends in the league, and Tyler Higbee was able to exploit that. Only ran 18 routes, though, on 30 golf dropbacks. Obviously turned that into 3 touchdowns, and I always, we talked a ton in the preseason about Tyler Higbee, one of the most controversial players. Dude can obviously make plays happen. 18 routes, though, on 30 dropbacks is going to scare me a little bit. Let's go to the Minnesota Vikings, probably one of the biggest disappointments, I would say, in the NFL so far. I mean, they've run fewer than 50 plays, which is insane. I mean, it's insane to run fewer than 50 plays in an NFL game. In their first 2 games, both times they've run fewer than 50 games. I mean, just pathetic. And shout out to Thorne, who was all over the mismatch between Indy's defensive line and Minnesota's offensive line. And that's how it played out. I will say Minnesota does have some good matchups coming up. Tennessee, Houston, Seattle, Atlanta, Detroit a little bit later. So maybe there's some chance, but it's not great right now. We do know that it's concentrated at least. And that, I think, keeps the light on for me at least in DFS, where, hey, if they have a good game, it's going to be Dalvin. It's going to be Thielen, and we know where it's going to go through. I think there's some value in that. But what do you think about what's going on with Minnesota?
They're just so bad. I was listening to the PFF forecast podcast with Eric Eager and George Charuri, and they were like debating whether to rank in their power rankings, have Minnesota at like number 31 ahead of only the Jets. And they were going back and forth. Like, one guy thought the Giants were a little worse, and then one guy had the Vikings at 31. But I mean, they look at like a freaking 3-win team right now. What do they really have as a strength on their roster? Their secondary is awful. They just lost Anthony Barr for the season at linebacker. Up front, Daniel Hunter is not there, and we don't know when he's going to be back. They lost Everson Griffin. Their defensive line isn't good. We knew their offensive line would be bad entering the year. They traded away Stephon Diggs. They don't really have a number 2 receiver. Their quarterback is a guy that, is about as good as his supporting cast is. And then they've got a good running back. So their roster is built like they have a good running back and nothing else. And we know that running backs generally don't move the needle. I mean, it's really, really bad for the Vikings right now.
Yeah, they are quite bad. Okay, New Orleans, this game last night, a lot of the rhetoric coming out of the game was, geez, I mean, and it's amazing to me how, like, air yards has gone mainstream. Like, even Drew Brees, like, took a question and answered it. He was like, yeah, I know, I'm aware of the air yards and all this. Like, it's just, he doesn't throw the ball. I mean, he's throwing the ball like 4 yards down the field on every play. And people are saying, well, Drew Brees is cooked. I mean, he's been doing this for a while. That's why his catch rate is so high. His completion percentage is so high. That's how Michael Thomas racks up 10 catches a game, and Alvin Kamara gets 8 or 9 catches. So I don't know. Nothing's really changed that much for me on Drew Brees. I don't think it's that much worse than it was before in terms of him being cooked. What did you see out of the Saints' kind of disappointing performance against the Raiders last night?
I just thought that he was a little bit more inaccurate than usual. Actually, maybe a lot more inaccurate than usual. Like, he was missing guys high and low that historically I don't think that he would miss. I don't know. I don't know, man. I mean, his deep ball hasn't been there for a while. So I think that you're right that, to focus in on that, then you're leaving out the context of what has gone on over the past few years. But yeah, no Michael Thomas definitely hurts. I would have to go back and watch it. I watched it last night, but why was Jared Cook not more involved? That was a big surprise to me. He did score the touchdown. He had a decent gain late, but I expected him to be a lot more involved. They need to get him going. I mean, he needs to be like their number 1 pass catcher until besides Kamara, until Michael Thomas gets back.
Yeah, one thing I know, no one wants to hear, but TD variance is such a huge part of fantasy football, and like no one wants to hear it. But Kamara
Mhm.
just ran bad last year on touchdowns. Like he only scored 6 touchdowns on 252 touches last year. This year he already has 4 touchdowns on 39 touches. And it's just it is what it is in fantasy. Like touchdowns are going to be these big events in small samples, and it makes a huge difference. But yeah, I mean, I just think Kamara is set up so well. As we said last week on this pod, yeah, Latavius is going to play, but there's so much value in being Drew Brees' primary check down. Like his catch rate is going to be absolutely through the roof. And when you get some goal line work and 10, 15 carries, and you also get 8 or 9 targets, like it's just Alvin Kamara's role is awesome. Okay, the Giants. As we were, well, first of all, let me mention Saquon Barkley, unfortunately out for the year. Feel bad for Saquon. Shout out to Penn State. While we were recording this podcast, the Giants went ahead and signed Devontae Freeman. So now they have Dion Lewis, they have Wayne Gallman, they have Devontae Freeman. Do you have any takes on any of these guys separating? How do you think the Giants are going to play it? I know this just happened. You haven't had a chance to digest it yet, but what do you think happens in the Giants' backfield?
Well, friend of the show, Jordan Renan, who covers the Giants, before the Devontae Freeman signing, and using sort of like the Patriots model, compared Wayne Gallman to Sony Michel and Dion Lewis to James White. But now we're adding in Devontae Freeman. I mean, Devontae Freeman's going to – I don't know how much he's got left. This is not going to be a good offensive situation. He's going to be in a three-man it's looking like a three-man committee. It's looking like a situation that it's going to be real rough to extract much fantasy value from. I do think that Dion Lewis, though, he's got a shot to be PPR relevant.
Yeah. And that's what's hard on the waiver wire this week. Like, we certainly prefer Mike Davis, but Christian McCaffrey could be back in like 3 or 4 weeks. But one of these Giants guys, I mean, Saquon's out for the year. So that's the kind of stuff that you have to weigh on the wire. We tried to do that as best we could in the waiver wired article for you that is up on the site. I would also note that Sterling Shepard went down in this game with a foot injury, and I feel bad for Sterling. He can't seem to stay healthy either. And Danny Dimes just can't catch a break, man. Like, this was the first game, this last game, where he had everybody healthy in the 3 wide receivers, Ingram and Barkley. Now he loses 2 of them. Probably be CJ Board in 3 wide receiver sets going forward for the Giants, but it's just not great. But I think Danny Dimes can still have spike weeks, man. Like, it sucks without Saquon, it sucks without Sterling, but he can still have some spike weeks. I'm not giving up on Danny Dimes just yet. And this San Francisco team that he's about to face is losing, like, they've lost like all their players. Like, to call San Francisco the San Francisco of old, and we'll get to them in a second, but they're like missing the point. I mean, they're missing so many guys. All right.
Yeah.
Philadelphia Eagles. Here's some good news on the injury front. As we suspected, as we talked about on Friday, as we talked about on Sunday, the Eagles unleashed Miles Sanders in his first game off the hamstring injury. 83% of the running back carries, 70% of the running back targets, 77% of the total snaps, 27 touches. 20 carries and 7 targets for Miles Sanders. And people say, oh, the Eagles, they always use a running back by committee. They always do. No, Boston Scott and Corey Clement are just like light years behind Miles Sanders. So that was good to see. And Miles Sanders, I think, as you might put on Twitter, is one of the top 5 running backs you'd like to have in fantasy right now. On the other side of the spectrum, Deshaun Jackson's start has been disappointing. Did get his usage up against the Rams, 36 routes on 44 dropbacks. Production wasn't there. People are worried about Carson Wentz. They say he had sex. Carson Wentz got married and he's very religious. He had sex and now he sucks. I mean, that's what people in Philly are saying, Evan. Anything on Carson Wentz and the Eagles?
Well, I don't get it. Is sex good or bad?
Well, we're working on that. We're working on finding that out.
Yeah. Oh man, what a good bit. Yeah, Miles Sanders got the Bengals coming up. I mean, it's set up for him to be like the focal point, really, of the offense, especially with Carson Wentz struggling. And Ben Baldwin put up, big time like analytics guy put up. He has a metric to kind of like distill which quarterbacks are playing at the highest levels. Carson Wentz was all the way at the bottom, like the worst in the league so far. And I mean, I don't think that his coaching staff has necessarily set him up for success. The Eagles are 19-18 since the Super Bowl. Like 9 of those wins have come against the Giants and the Washington football team. They just haven't been that great, for they've just been real mediocre, and they've sort of like eked into the playoffs since. But with Deshaun Jackson, I'm sticking with him because He is dominating the air yard share in Philadelphia with 37%. He led the team in targets, catches, and receiving yards last week. Jalen Reagor is still being Jalen Reagor got up to 89% of the snaps in week 2, but he still has not cleared 4 targets in an individual game. There are, sort of a lot of mouths to feed in this offense now, though, with Miles Sanders healthy, with Djax healthy, with Jalen Reagor healthy, with, the 2 tight ends that are always going to have big involvement. Dallas Goedert had 8 targets again last week, which I believe puts him at like 5 or 6 in a row dating back to last season. With their quarterback not playing well, it's going to be tough to pin down which guys are going to have big games in individual weeks. Although I think that we can count on Miles Sanders certainly against Cincinnati in week 3. I mean, this matchup should hopefully get the Eagles offense sort of like off the schneid.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me to see Deshaun Jackson in the buy low model. Haven't seen it yet, expecting it to be out late tonight or early tomorrow morning. Hermsmeyer's buy low model on the site. San Francisco, man, and you can make a case San Francisco has had the worst injury luck this season, maybe Denver, but San Francisco, I mean, just keeps piling on. They lose Jimmy G to an ankle sprain. He's in doubt. We know about Nick Mullins. He started plenty of games before. Raheem Mostert was playing so well. He gets an MCL injury. Tevin Coleman has a knee issue. Nick Bosa on the defensive side of the ball add to all their woes. Meanwhile, Jerick McKinnon, old friend Jerick McKinnon, who we remember from the first guy who was like, kind of the bit was he's a spark freak, and everybody busting balls about spark freaks. But, Jerick McKinnon has looked really healthy. And Jeff Wilson, by the way, who caught 8 balls in a game a couple years ago from Nick Mullins, if you remember, he's around too. JaMychal Hasty as well. Let's start with quarterbacking, though. What can you tell people about Nick Mullins? Because we do have a reasonable sample on Nick Mullins starting games in the NFL.
Yeah, played at Southern Miss with old friend Todd Monken. Mm-hmm. Went undrafted. But landed in San Francisco, and you quickly sort of asserted himself as a superior player to CJ Beathard, who they had drafted in the 3rd round, and then wound up making starts. And if you look at his efficiency, Nick Mullins' efficiency, it is not really any worse in his starts. It is not any worse than Jimmy Garoppolo's. And, it's like right in the Kirk Cousins range. So it just sort of makes you wonder, there's definitely a system QB thing going on here. I don't know. Nick Mullins is going to be, if he gets the start against the Giants, certainly a 2 quarterback league play. And, mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe a guy that will look at it in DFS. We'll have to see. I mean, the problem is that the supporting cast has disintegrated. I don't think they're going to play George Kittle. I mean, they're pissed about this field thing.
Yeah.
At MetLife, Kyle Shanahan is pissed about this field thing. He thinks that the field was not in, great condition and, played a role in the 49ers having all these week 2 injuries. And now they're playing at the same field again this week because they're playing the Jets and the Giants back to back.
Yeah.
So my guess that they're not going to take any risks on this field.
I think one of the big questions for Waiver Wire this week is how do you view McKinnon versus Jeff Wilson? Do you think they can actually give McKinnon early down work, or do you think they keep McKinnon the same role and give Jeff Wilson the early down work?
As much as I would love to see, I own Jerick McKinnon in main event, and I have him on a bunch of best balls and stuff. As much as I would like to see them get really, really up his usage, I think that they need to be careful with him. I think they know that. I think he's looked really good.
Yeah.
And I do think that he will see a bump, but I don't think that he's going to jump into the workhorse role. I do believe that Jeffrey Wilson will be very involved. Jeffrey Wilson is a bigger back that can use him at the goal line. He vultured a bunch of goal line touchdowns last year. You mentioned the game where he had 8 catches, showed some versatility. And then I think they will pull JaMychal Hasty off of the practice squad. JaMychal Hasty was a guy that a lot of beat writers said had a really nice training camp, and a lot of the sort of dynasty aficionado people in the fantasy football community were on JaMychal Hasty even before he landed with San Francisco.
Let's go to Seattle, man. And I can't believe that's really happening. It's actually happening. The second most pass happy team in the NFL, behind only the Bills, which we'll get to on the next podcast. But I mean, it's wild. I mean, Russ is going to walk to the MVP award, and Josh Allen might have something to say about it, hopefully. But Russ is the favorite right now to walk to the MVP award if they're going to let him cook like this. Again, second most pass happy team. They were dead last in passing rate over expectation in previous years. And next they get Dallas, Miami, Minnesota, and Arizona. Like, Russ is going to go absolutely nuclear. I don't see how you could think anything bad about what's going on here with Seattle. I guess maybe Chris Carson owners aren't that happy, but I think Chris Carson's going to find his way to some good touchdown variants coming up. What do you think about what's going on with Seattle?
I liked how last week Bill Belichick called Russell Wilson the best player in the NFL, and everybody's like, "What about Mahomes, dude? What about Mahomes?" Well, what about Mahomes? What about him? Because Russ is straight cooking right now, and I think he is the best player in the NFL right now. And yeah, I mean, it's like Josh Allen that's a big obstacle for the long shot MVP bet. But yeah, I mean, we talked about 3 team stacks entering the season ad nauseum. And it was Atlanta, and it was Dallas, and it was Seattle. And I mean, I know that me and you put together a team in Football Guys Championship that stacked 2 of those offenses. Mm-hmm. And then I have a bunch of Cowboys stacks, and these offenses have largely stayed healthy, and they look like they're on league-winning tracks. It's really early, it's really early. But from if you were to project, like, what are the 3 best offenses to stack? And I think that Arizona also does belong in that mix, and some other offenses. Certainly, Kansas City is going to make a statement, in Baltimore, et cetera. But like on a value basis, from an ADP basis, those were the best 3 offenses, I think, to stack. And if you've got one of those, I think you will be able to overcome some of these early season injuries that have crushed teams.
Not the best day as we move to the Bucks. Not the best day for Ronald Jones truthers. Lenny Fournette comes in and he outsnapped Ronald Jones in quarter 2, in quarter 3, and in quarter 4. The fumble, on the exchange with Brady was pretty clearly Ronald Jones's fault. Bruce Arians said so after the game. And then Lenny comes in and ices the game at the end. He ends up outsnapping Rojo 26-21. Lenny saw 5 targets, and we know Tom Brady likes throwing the running backs. Lenny saw 5 targets. I'm not sure that Ronald Jones is ready for that. So I couldn't really imagine a much worse day for Ronald Jones and a better day for Leonard Fournette. I think there'll still be some kind of committee here, but you could probably make a case that Fournette is maybe the guy that's 1A and Rojo is the 1B now. How do you see it playing out with the Bucs backfield?
Yeah, and then LaShawn McCoy also dropped a touchdown in the fourth quarter, adding to the comedy of errors in the Tampa Bay backfield committed by everyone except for Leonard Fournette. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, to me, it was inevitable that this was going to happen. Ronald Jones isn't very good. And all it takes is, a mistake or two to piss off Tom Brady and see ya. Right. And LaShawn McCoy has been washed, I think, for a couple of years. So I think this is going to be Leonard Fournette's backfield going forward.
Yeah, good news on Chris Godwin. He is expected back for this next game. And I just wanted to get another shot in on Gronk just while he's down. I mean, he can't even earn targets. He's ran 42 routes and Tom Brady's only thrown at him 4 times. It's just 10th time for Rob Gronkowski. And they got him to block. And I think he's going to have a ton of value in that. And they have young tackles and weak tackles. And, I think he's going to be valuable, but just not in fantasy. Okay. Last team, the Washington football team. I think good news. Roll spike for Antonio Gibson, and it certainly helped that they were behind the entire game. There's going to be scripts, if they can get into scripts where they're winning, there's going to be Peyton Barber scripts also, but Peyton Barber barely played in this game as Arizona just came out to a huge lead early. It was all Gibson. Gibson ended up handling 59% of the running back carries, which I think is good. The other thing that I noticed in this game was, and we knew this going in, I mean, Patrick Peterson ain't it anymore. Terry McLaurin was just icing Patrick Peterson, and Terry McLaurin is obviously a straight baller. And when you talk about target shares and why Terry McLaurin was a strong 4th round pick, well, we can project him for 140 targets or something like that. There's a ton of value in that, not to mention the shower narrative. What did you see out of Washington's loss out in Arizona?
Yeah, I mean, just agree with everything that you just said. And I would add that Logan Thomas, although he was very inefficient, he's been inefficient in both of his first 2 games. He did get in the box in week 1, and that helped him, but he had 4 for 26 on, I think, 8 targets in this last game, or 9 targets. And I'm not worried about it. I'm sticking with him. He's still got a 27% handle on the air yard share there. He did get overtaken by McLaurin, and that was inevitable, and that's going to stay that way for the rest of the year. But, there's a clear-cut top 2 guys that are commanding looks in this offense, and Logan Thomas is the 1B behind Terry McLaurin. Logan Thomas's snaps also went up to 91% after 74% in the opener. So, and then now he's got Washington is facing a Browns defense that, is sort of like the Eagles built, not built, like strong at linebacker and safety, and proactively not like they invest money elsewhere. They invest draft picks elsewhere. And so they're going to get beat up by tight ends, just like they did by Mark Andrews in week 1. And then CJ Uzoma and Drew Sample combined for a huge game against the Browns in week 2. So sticking with Logan Thomas.
I think people are probably wondering, who would you rather have, Logan Thomas or Dalton Schultz for the rest of the season?
Logan Thomas.
Okay. All right. That is going to do it for the NFC team-by-team pods recapping week 2, looking ahead to week 3. The AFC version of this podcast will be on the premium feed. If you haven't signed up yet, head to establishyourrun.com. Again, we have weekly, we have monthly, we have full season options all available. So, for producer Luke, for Evan, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.